Let's see. Well, let's pause that. Good morning, everyone. It is Tuesday. That means it's time for Tuesday Training and Tactics. I'm Melissa Schwartz, the managing broker here of the Paradise Valley Realty One Group. I've already been asked this morning, how are things going? And I said, oh, well, you know what? We're going to talk about that. That's going to be what we're going to have fun this morning with. So I hope you're all ready because it actually has been a lot of fun watching documents. Let me go ahead and get started if I can click the right screen here. I am going to take this down to just me. That did not work. Let me do this just so I can see what is happening behind me. So, and then do this. So folks online, if you want to answer, you're going to have to unmute because I cannot see you on my screen, unfortunately. But I do want to just remind people in terms of the compensation form and what we're using, I should actually put another one up here because I failed to talk about that. There is a tenant broker exclusive employment agreement. If you are doing a rental, please do not use these up here. There is a big reason for that, and I will show that a little bit later. I'm going to have to watch my time to make sure I can show you that entire form. If you hear me say CAB, that means compensation agreement between brokers. SCA is the seller compensation agreement. In the past, we talked about adding language to the PC. Please do not add any language to the purchase contract. We now have forms for that. Do not put compensation, commission, or paying an agent anywhere on your purchase contract. It does not belong there. All right, let's move on. So, you know, it's been fun. We've had a new agreement. I'm not sure everybody's watched the classes, and I'm not sure they quite understand what this language means. That I'm not going to read all of this, but there's one line I want to highlight here. Could you read that for me? What does that say?
Check only one and fill
Yeah,
the compensation.
check only one and fill in the compensation. So let's see how that's going, shall we? Let's see. Well, that actually did just have one, but and by the way, anybody on here that recognizes one of these, please don't say anything. Your name is not on here. I'm not outing anybody. No agents' names, no client names will be on here. But these are all literally things that have been in the broker inbox for review this week. Oh, wait, today's Tuesday. This week. Okay. So what is wrong with line 36? And people online, feel free to jump on. Tell me what's wrong with that line.
Can't be a variable.
Has to be ascertainable.
Look, our title person jumped in. Cannot be a variable. So per home visited will be negotiated. We cannot negotiate further. You must have one ascertainable, a specific amount. It can be a dollar price, it can be a percentage, it could be, I don't know, the family pet. If you really wanted other, you get Rocco. I don't know. You get the dog, right? I don't know, but it has to be something specific, right? Okay, so let's see what else we've got. Well, now is that legal? $1. Sure, that's legal. You can get just $1. That is totally fine. How about this one? This is the one that I should have had first to respond to the other.
There's two.
Well, first of all, there's only one line.
Oh, that's right. The other box.
Well, it doesn't. Okay, so yeah, forgetting to check the box doesn't count. You cannot write on two of these lines. One line should be checked and one line should have information in it. So again, can you put down there to be compensated by seller or seller's broker? No, you can't. And let's see, what do we have here? Oh, here's some language. This has been really fun, right? This says in additional to, these are in the buyer broker agreements, folks, right? Seller listing brokers typically offer buyer broker compensation if the amount offered by selling listing broker is less than the agreed to buyer broker compensation. Buyer will be notified prior to making an offer to request some or all of it to be paid by the seller if desired, or buyer is not required to purchase or by any specific date. I'm not quite sure what that sentence even means, but you certainly can say, I mean, first of all, the word typically should not be in a contract. There is no such thing as typically. I'd like to know how you know that, because we're in a new world. So what are you typically referring to? What contracts? The ones that started 3 weeks ago? The ones that started a week ago? So you cannot use word typically anyway. There is no such thing. You cannot talk about something less than or more than, or something will be changed. That cannot be on the buyer broker compensation. We will send this back to you and say this is not a valid contract. So I don't know what you're doing then to get paid, because you now have a non-valid contract. And usually we're seeing this after you've gone under contract. So how are you getting paid? Because this is not legal. Okay. So how about this one? If seller is compensating buyer broker compensation at close of escrow, and the buyer broker compensation is more than 2.5% of the purchase price, the balance will be credited to buyer towards buyer's closing costs at close of escrow as permitted by the buyer's lender. Now, that's interesting, because some of this language is already in this.
Doesn't need to be in there.
It's already in there. The part that shouldn't be here is the 2.5% of the purchase price. If the buyer broker agreement is for 2.5%, and that is what is there, then the contract already says this, right? You do not need this again. I would not add it, because it's liable to make your contract void. Okay, how about this? Is that legal to do? NA agents also buyer and is self-representing. It is legal to do. So how much is that buyer's agent going to earn on this transaction? Zero. How much are they able to use to offset their closing costs if they had planned on doing that?
Same.
Zero. So please, I understand you're self-representing yourself and you may be the buyer, but if you plan to use that money for closing costs, you are now getting zero. So there is no money at closing cost time. So if you were negotiating something, that's probably not the way to present yourself. If you're the buyer and you're the agent, why can't you do a BBEA with yourself? Are you having trouble negotiating with yourself? I don't know. I think I'd negotiate for a nice, tidy sum, because you can redo it towards the end if you don't get it in your negotiations. But if you get it in your negotiations and you have zero on this, you're getting zero. So, and there's some question about whether or not you can increase your buyer broker after it's already been filed. So that one I don't actually have an answer for you. All right, let's talk about this, because one of those things actually brought this up, right? Buyer broker compensation, US currency, blah, 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 okay? Compensation from seller or seller's broker. And this is what this other person kind of wrote in here, right? That the seller broker may offer the compensation. I'm going to jump to the bottom though. If seller or seller's broker's offer of compensation is less than the broker compensation, buyer may request seller to pay the broker compensation as part of the, oh, this is the cap, part of the offer to purchase the property. Any broker compensation not paid by seller broker shall be paid by buyer. How hard is that to understand? Right? So, and then the one above is if seller or seller's broker offer of compensation is greater, broker will not receive any amount greater than the broker compensation from any source for services provided in this agreement. So again, as a buyer broker, let's just say randomly that your buyer broker agreement is for 2.5%. If the new home build or if the seller offers you 3%, you can only collect 2.5%, period. Who does that other 0.5% go to?
Buyer.
The buyer, right? And do you think that my buyer was upset when I told them that when I was talking to them the other day? By the way, if we are able to negotiate more than this, you get the other 0.5%. Do you like that? Yes. Wow, I'm working for you, buyer. How about that? Right? This is all part of what you can have as a part of your conversation with your client. I know you had a buyer presentation earlier, but let's keep going through these. So again, I clipped this out, right? Broker will not receive any amount greater than broker compensation other from any source for services provided in this agreement, right? That's pretty clear. So actually, I guess I repeated that. So that's good. Oh, I know, I repeated it because I was highlighting. I don't know why the first one did that. Okay. Buyer broker agreement to show property, similar form, right? Again, check only one. This literally was, these are all clipped from contracts I have received
This week.
These are real
this
contracts.
week. These are real contracts this week. Yeah. These are all
One day.
from broker reviews. Well, from the weekend.
Okay.
So there was stuff in my inbox. Okay. So again, this now says no compensation from buyer. Can you say that?
Yeah, sure. You're working for free. Not gonna get paid.
Well, but you can't. Because the document, I'll come back to, can I go backwards? So if this says 0 and you get something from the seller, what are you getting?
It goes to the buyer.
I think it goes back to the seller if you write that. No,
No, it goes to the buyer,
You're getting nothing.
but you're getting
It
nothing.
literally goes-
oh, you're getting, right.
You're getting nothing, right? So you're getting nothing by writing in no compensation from buyer.
Right.
Your buyer gets whatever you're negotiating for. Was that really the plan?
No,
I don't think so. And
I
the,
wonder what the plan was by doing.
I think their plan was saying that if they didn't negotiate what they were looking for, then the buyer is not responsible for it. But folks, you cannot do that. The whole reason the buyer broker was put into place is the buyer is responsible for your commission. You can offer to negotiate all of that or the majority of that as a part of your job as an agent. Talk to them and say, look, part of what I will do is go out and negotiate this for you. And I would take away the conversation in terms of a buyer, a presentation, I would take away from the conversation saying, but if we don't get it, I'll credit you. You cannot say that. Let me make it very clear. Please, 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 you've written a contract. The contract says the buyer is responsible. You cannot say, oh, but if we don't get that, I'll give you back, blah, 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 blah. Because what have you just done?
Invalidated your contract.
You've invalidated that contract because the one thing that contract has to be is ascertainable. It has to have a specific amount. So if I say to you, I want 2.5%, but if I don't get the 2.5%, don't worry, I'll take care of you.
Yeah,
I'll reduce it.
The verbal.
The verbal and written terms, that's a perfect way to say it. The verbal and the written terms do not match. You must have a written document that is ascertainable. If you start doing verbal things, let me explain to you very clearly, everybody online, please hear this. There are shoppers out there. If you did not think attorneys were going to have fun with this, you are wrong. We have already heard of people shopping agents and they are waiting for you to make these mistakes. Can somebody tell me what, if you go take somebody to go look at a property and do not have a buyer broker agreement, do you remember what that fine is? The first one?
Then 5,000.
The second one is 5,000. Oh, wait, the minimum is 5,000. Minimum is 5,000. And we already know, this is not a joke. We already know people are being shopped. So please do your buyer broker paperwork. Do not let somebody take advantage of you. You know how to do this. In my office, I know you guys know how to do this. So if you're here today, I know you know how to do this. So, all right, let's look at this. Is this allowed to be done as well? So this is the buyer broker agreement to show property. Check any that apply and fill in the compensation. So, oh no, this is the list. The bottom is the listing agreement, isn't it? So let's see, sale. The bottom is not the buyer broker agreement to show property.
It's from,
That's the
SCA.
SCA. The bottom is the SCA. So the seller compensation addendum, is that allowed to be on there? So the sale is $1,000, right? Check any that apply, that's fine. This compensation is in addition to any seller concessions credited to buyer if applicable. And the bottom section says 0%. Well, first of all, the box is in check, so there isn't a separate written agreement, so I'm not worried about that. And yes, you could take $1,000 at close of escrow. Now let's see if I've got some other SCAs in here. I don't know why we have buyer broker on top there. Because I came back to it. So no compensation from buyer. That's the one we had earlier. Oh, I'm repeating my pages. Oh, I know why. Well, I don't know why that came in there. My property address is on the wrong document. We'll figure that one out. Okay. So this is a buyer broker agreement to show property. What is wrong with this document?
2 boxes checked.
This is actually something that showed up in my system. What is wrong with this document?
What's a sample on it?
Yeah.
Please, folks.
Giving us a sample.
Right, that's actually real, that somebody really presented that as a valid contract?
So
Yeah.
I have talked to the agent, so they're fine, they understand. So please, you do need to use samples when you're sending things out.
Right.
But when you are actually meeting your clients, please do not use the AAR version that has sample written across it, okay? So what else is wrong with this document? So you mentioned it, lines 17 and 18, both are greened. I think what may have been intended is they greened it so that somebody would write on one of those, but I'm not quite sure which one. It doesn't matter. It says 0 anyway. They're not getting any compensation. So I know what happened here, and that's fine. They had somebody come into an open house. They said, look, I already have a realtor. I just want to see the home next door. Would you show it to me? So they did this knowing full well they're not getting compensation. They're not going to be writing the contract. Somebody else is going to write it. So they just put 0 there and went to show the home. That is fine. I hate to say it, but that is fine. If you truly know that they are not going to work with you, no problem. But up above is part of what I want to talk about is up here. It says Maricopa County address or city or county. I think this may have been their notes that they actually copied their notes from a class. So, and I didn't ask them about that, but here's the thing. If you are taking somebody on the specific property, right? You're at an open house, they want to see the home around the corner, right? Fine, fill this out. I don't care if you're in Glendale, then just write Glendale, or you can write home on, the 5200 block of Tatum, right? That's fine. You don't even have to have the exact address. You can say the 5200 block if you know the address is going to start with 52 something something, right? But you can put other there and put in an address if you want to. And again, in this scenario, they knew it wasn't going anywhere.
I think the lesson here is be prepared at your open house.
But that's the number 1.
And have the single property showing one.
Well, there is no single property showing one. You either have specific,
Well, I mean, the non-exclusive. one.
the non-exclusive one, that's fine.
And so that's because they obviously wanted to do something right.
They
Right.
needed to do
Without
something.
putting
right.
going in a house without having.
Correct.
Yeah.
And folks, if that occurs, absolutely have this, be prepared, but also know how to fill it out correctly, okay? Residential, and again, you could put you could put the city or the town. It's not going to matter if all you're showing them is one property, you're in and done and out of there, and make sure they have your information. Should something happen with their other agent, you've shown them that you will go the extra mile, knowing full well you're not getting paid, right? Make sure they have that.
You're
All
probably
right.
gonna get the $500.
So here, yeah, you won't get the 5. So here's where I would put property address. Now I also would check the box residential and the box other. That's fine. You can check both of those boxes. That line does not say only one. We have had people check residential and land or residential and commercial. That's totally fine. Okay. So this has been a huge issue, folks. When docs are signed makes a big difference. Why?
Well, they require me the 72 hours. I mean, the uploading.
Yes, so
It's already-
72 hours from when it's executed needs to be in our system when the buyer broker agreements, the ER agreements, or the purchase contract within 72 hours, those absolutely have to be in. That is correct, but if you're signing a buyer broker agreement, And today, what is today? Today is the 27th. If you sign the document on the 29th, but go look at the property on the 27th,
Oops, oops.
it's not so good. And what happens if your client signs it, but you don't sign it?
Valid.
It's not enforced.
Yeah,
Okay, so this term shall commence, meaning start. If folks did not know, commence means to start on 8/18 of 2024. That's fine, right? And it was signed on what date? And what date was it executed?
I don't see that
Not
agent
fully.
signatures and a date, so.
There is no agent signature or date. So agent's not getting paid. There's no executed document here. And why did the agreement start on 8/18 and not get signed until the 23rd? And did something happen between 8/18 and 8/23? If you guys do not understand, the MLS can call us and say, we would like to see the file on this address. And guess what? We have to give it to them.
And they know when you looked at it through a line, right?
No, we don't see when you looked at it online. We see,
they see this, they see this.
MLS could see your aligned stuff, sure.
So if you look at
Sure.
it before 8, well, this
Well,
is not even enforced.
it's-
So if you
it's-
look at any time, you're already.
It's not a contract. So if you showed this person property, you actually did not have a buyer broker agreement. There is no contract here. If people are not understanding, line 34 needs to have an agent's signature and date. And again, these are all documents that are in my inbox, right? These are all for review. These are all in SkySlope.
A question
Yep.
about this sort of, what happened yesterday. What about this form? It can still be signed in counterparts, right? Like, we had the man who was,
Yes,
yeah, and then the girlfriends now are gonna be on the contract. So she needs to sign something now too. This is like at this time of contract. So we you know what I mean? And then we have her signature on one and his signature on another,
that's fine.
but it's like.
And if
he's
she didn't
signing
go
now.
look at it, if he went to look at it, the other thing that can happen is, I mean, and I've heard this before, like, do I need the daughter and son-in-law to sign when the buyer is the mom?
That's what I have too.
And it's like, if the purchaser is the mom and they're bringing friends or family, no, the friends or family do not need to sign this. Now, the friends or family are gonna purchase something or they're a part of that, yes, they do need to sign it, okay? But if they're not buying anything, you can take the father, the brother, the, uncle, whatever, they can come view the property. You do not need them to sign, right? It's only meant for those people that are actually purchasing property.
So like in that case though, we had the man sign, uploaded it to
Sure.
SkySlope. Now the girlfriend's gonna be on it. We had her sign, but it
Yes.
wasn't the same when he signed.
Correct.
So just get them all into the same SkySlope.
Yep, put them on the
Yeah.
same, just to overlay them.
They can be
You can
counterparts.
absolutely do those. I wouldn't even call that counterpart, really, because it's another document, because it's gonna be executed at totally different dates.
Yeah,
So it really isn't in counterpart. Counterpart would be as if I'm sending you one and I'm sending him something else the same day. It's all coming back, we're signing it, and then it's in counterpart. So, but please remember, you do have to execute it, right? So here we have, so here's the purchase contract. And this is getting flagged, just so you know, I get this on all of these. Buyer broker agreement is signed by one party on 8/23, forget that the other party didn't. And the purchase contract is signed on 8/23. We don't have the timestamps, folks. Maybe you need to put timestamps on, I don't know. But everybody's asking, well, did they sign the purchase contract first? Did they sign the buyer broker agreement first? It's on the same day. So guess what? I get to review a lot more documents.
if they never saw the property at all, does it matter?
No, and it doesn't matter that it's done on the same day, But the question is, when was it done? And that we can't tell. Right? We have no way of knowing which one was signed first. And so they're flagging the broker has to call and say, just a reminder, you should be getting this signed in advance. So please,
To use the timestamp too.
Well, I
You're-
mean, it
you're
wouldn't
welcome
matter if you
to.
Sent it all together, so I guess you'd have to send the buyer broker agreement 5 minutes before, then send the contract. If it was like, hey, we just saw this, like, we're let's write an offer. We're not seeing it in person kind of thing. Does it happen?
well, if they're not seeing it in person, that's fine. And probably what I would do is if you load
No.
that in, put that on the note.
Mhm, and
That
additional
the
part.
buyer was an investor, never saw the property. They called and wanted us to write the contract, so that's why everything is together.
Mhm.
Just put it on the side comments, that's
Okay.
fine. But yeah, this is a huge part of what is being flagged, is that these are coming in at the same time. Are there scenarios where it makes sense? Absolutely, right? We understand that those things do happen. Uh, So could somebody tell me,
What's going on?
Whoa.
Send it back.
Well, line 60 is not done, so I don't know what's exactly wrong or right.
that's correct, there is no, we don't know whether it's a buyer or seller. So we don't know which one was being, I mean, originally, the seller section on line 57 was checked. So somehow that probably got crossed out, but I don't know. I don't know what happened here.
Send it back.
So I did have to send it back. I said, please redo this. So, but this is a really good point. If you are making changes to the contract, here's the problem when you go to the contract and actually cross through something, an initial, it has to be evident which one you're crossing out and which one you're moving forward with. In a court of law, what is the court going to say here? We have no idea, right? So your job is to make sure that that contract is clear. Like that, if you're writing that contract or you're receiving and helping your client complete the contract, your job is to make sure you're protecting their interests. I don't know what interests we're protecting here. And by the way, if you call me, usually the first thing I ask is, wait, who are we representing? Before you go down this whole thing, and who's representing the other side? Because I need to know if it's a limited representation or not before I answer questions, right? Okay, so if you're going to make changes to the contract, this is a great way to do it, right? You do an addendum that says line 18 of, look, the residential purchase contract is considered checked. So obviously a box wasn't checked. I sometimes say will be amended to read, right? Be amended to note that the box is checked, okay? Or the other one is saying unchecked, right? So you could check, uncheck. This is how you do it rather than crisscrossing all over the documents. We can't tell what happened. Now, a lot of people are, this is a seller financing addendum, not the seller compensation addendum, but a lot of people are asking, and I've gotten this call, I want to say 6 times. Well, we don't like the way the seller compensation addendum looks, so we're sending a new one back to them. Like, do you send a new HOA addendum? Do you go and write up the HOA addendum and send it out? Yeah, Jenna, go ahead. You
So
need
we got this advanced training, but we receive all these documents. I mean, if I represent the buyer, then I will receive these counters from another office. They didn't get this kind of like the quality of training. So you ask me, hey, ask them to return it, and they get mad. And they don't understand. I mean, I call this period of time is the struggle when everyone is trying to learn and grasp.
Right, but my point, Jenna, is that we use the counter offer form for all of this. And a lot of people are trying to replace documents. You cannot replace the document.
Yep.
So please understand it. And if you get somebody saying, oh no, we have to replace that, just say, please check with your broker, send them back to their broker. I don't know what else to say to that. And trust me when I say I'm sure there are brokers out there that are actually saying to do that, but the reality is the seller compensation addendum is an addendum, just like the HOA addendum, just like, the
A water.
well water addendum, the septic, the solar addendum, right? Because we don't like it, we don't replace it. We counter it in the counteroffer with nice, clean language like you see up above there.
And a side note here is, if you don't want people to counter, make sure your offer is very clean, because even if I have to, say one box to be checked, I'll say, what else do we counter?
Mhm.
Let's just
Yeah,
do
let's
the
open it up.
price, let's do the title.
Right.
If we're gonna send it, I'm gonna make other changes that I want.
I
So
hope
if I
folks
get a
online
very
heard that.
clean offer, that it's easier for the seller just to sign, I accept it.
Melissa Gasper said, if you are writing the offer and you write a nice, clean, consistent offer all the way through with all the boxes checked correctly, then what are they countering? If they're not having to counter anything, once you open that door, then it's a free-for-all for what they're gonna counter
They have
on
the-
there.
Yeah.
They have the power of the pen. I love that.
Especially line 181 and 182.
Oh, yeah, with
Those
the,
up, 'cause
yeah,
that's the
181 and
biggest one,
82.
like,
Yep,
oh
for the
my
lead-based paint.
gosh.
Okay.
And
So let's talk about this. Yes, the counteroffer is there, but other ways you can modify a contract. I want to make sure everybody knows these different addendums, because there are a couple of them. You have an addendum that has not changed. It was written in 1993 for those of you that weren't born then. Yes.
and really should be sequential in number, not 2 number 1s or 2 number 3s.
That's a little hard.
We did have a scenario just recently that both agents sent out an addendum number 2 at the simultaneously, and they both signed it, and it was like, yeah, I think they went back and put A and B on it, but that is what happened. They literally did go out at the same
Is it
time.
really going to be?
They did add that later just to try and correct that. Okay, but there's an addendum. Then we have a listing contract addendum, right? Then we now have buyer tenant employment agreement addendum. So let's go back to the first addendum. Who is the first addendum between?
Buyer and seller.
Buyer and seller, right? So if you have something that you want to change regarding your compensation, are you using the standard general old addendum? No, you're not, right? You're okay. So who is, should I hit that?
Seller.
Who is the listing contract addendum between? So a lot of people did not know this actually existed before August of 2024. This has been there for a couple of years. They did modify it. But this is if you are the listing agent and you are doing something with the owner, it's between the broker and the owner, right? So this is the addendum. Now, can you use a sold change form?
Yes,
Yes. Why would you use the listing contract addendum versus the sold change form?
because maybe it doesn't have to be true with MLS. Like I
If
said,
it doesn't have anything to do with the MLS, maybe it has more details in there, has to do with compensation, right? Or something to do with changing other terms on the actual listing agreement that isn't on the MLS. The sold change form is very specific to what changes on the actual MLS, okay? But if you're doing a lot of changes, don't do both of them, do one. They can all go on the listing contract addendum and you can then go change the MLS. You don't need the sold change form. You've already gotten the owner's permission and signature, okay? Who is the buyer tenant employment agreement between?
buyer.
No, buyer and buyer. Yes, buyer and buyer broker. Yes, buyer and buyer's agent, buyer broker. Okay. So if you are changing the amount of compensation as a buyer broker, which form are you using? The bottom one, buyer tenant employment agreement addendum. This addends 3 different documents. The buyer broker exclusive employment agreement, the buyer broker agreement to show property, and the tenant broker employment agreement. Okay, there are 3 different documents that this can amend. Please use the right addendum, folks, because otherwise you have the wrong people noted to be signing. All right, let's see what else we have here. Oh, this is the big one that has been driving me nuts. What's wrong? This is a agency. For those that don't recognize this, this is your ready form, your agency form. What is wrong with the upper section here with the buyer?
The middle one is checked.
All 3 boxes are checked. Yes, Jenna, go ahead.
It looks like they may be misinterpreting dual agency, like they are representing the buyer and the seller at the same time.
So is this where that goes?
No, no, we have the consent form that we have to sign, not here.
Correct, right? So let me show you what this looks like on the other side of this, right? Oh, we could be representing everybody as well on the bottom side. Like, hold on a second. So this is the seller, so we're just gonna check all boxes, but you're absolutely correct in terms, and I'll talk about it in just a second. So this is how this should look. If you are taking a buyer out, when you meet them, you should be checking both 48 and 50 unless, like you have the person that refuses to see other Realty One Group properties. Oh, no, that was the listing side. They did not want, was that yours? That wasn't yours.
No.
That was yours. Sorry,
No.
wrong guy there. So yeah, unless you have, that was on the selling side. They refused to allow Realty One Group. They did not want their listing agent to be in a limited representation. So, but in this scenario, if you're taking buyers out, unless you plan to not show Realty One Group properties, you must have both 48 and 50 checked. Let me make sure that's clear. If you're going to show Realty One Group properties, you must have box 50 checked, because otherwise they've told you, I do not want you to show me properties by Realty One Group, right? So if I get a contract that's with both Realty One Groups and your agency says only that first box, we've got a problem. Right? And then what are we going to look at? We're going to go look at your buyer broker agreement, see if you've also made a mistake on that. Folks, that's really, really important. You should be understanding how to explain your agency and that they're going to see Realty One Group properties. And as Jenna said, so what happens is you've signed the buyer broker agreement. You've signed the agency. It's already done. You represent the buyer. If they end up making an offer on a property that is a Realty One Group listing, that is when the consent to limited representation comes into place. Broker represents both buyer and seller or both landlord and tenant. And if you notice, 9 through 25 here have a longer conversation. You need to sit down and explain this transition. How have you done that on the agency form when you just check 3 boxes? Oh, by the way, here, tick, check, 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 done. Did you actually talk about consent to limited representation? Because that's what the brokerage is worried about. You just checked a bunch of boxes. Yeah, it's not a big deal. They knew. They knew. It's okay. Really? There's a form that you're supposed to be going over. And we should see that transition, right? Now, here's the problem we're seeing. I represent the seller. I already know that. Buyer walks into the open house. I don't have a buyer broker agreement, right? Today's the 26th. That was yesterday. Had my open house. Buyer walks in. I like this house. All right. I want to write an offer. You're going to write an offer and you're going to be a dual representative. Okay. Here's agency. Check, check, check. Let me check all these boxes because I already represent the seller. No, folks, you don't do that. Okay. You check the box. And in fact, you don't have to check the bottom one. You check the box that you represent them as a buyer broker. Oh yeah, you do. You have to check 48 and 50 buyer broker, and you're showing, right? 48 and 50, you would be checking 48 and 50 with that buyer, and then you'd hand the consent to limited representation. Now let's talk about this. Are you sure you want me to represent you? Let's go back to this. You understand this is how this is going to work. If not, you need to go find another buyer representative to represent you.
Do you need to check with your seller? See that?
One would hope before you hold an open house that you've had that conversation. Because if you're holding an open house and you have not had that conversation, that's a problem. Right? That is a part of your listing presentation because you're now filling in 3 categories on your listing presentation, what you are getting, plus if it's an unrepresented buyer, or plus if there's a buyer broker, and if there's nothing on that buyer broker line, you've skipped that, right? If you are leaving that blank, 50 and 51 of your listing presentation, because the seller's up for that, what do you have to do in that scenario? What's gonna have to be done with this buyer? Any guesses? If you're the listing agent and on your listing contract, you leave lines 50 and 51 blank, and on the back, you add the language that says the seller is offering compensation, please include an SCA with your offer. What are you having to do when you're talking to that buyer that's walked in on that open house? I am looking at blank faces here.
It's like that CA.
What else do you have to fill in beyond the SCA? A buyer broker agreement, right? And so this is the scenario where I do understand the person's walked into the open house. They're saying they want to buy the property. They want you to represent them. It is August 26th. You are writing the buyer broker agreement, the agency, the consent, the offer, the SCA, all with the same date of the 26th. And our office is going bing, 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 bing. It's like, it can happen, folks. I understand that, right? But give us some understanding, give us some information that explains what happened so we know. Protect yourself. I don't care if you want to write a page and throw it in as a miscellaneous document. This guy showed up at the open house, my listing. We did all of this sitting at the kitchen table because the sellers are out of town and we wrote the offer right in person. Okay. At least it gives us the storyline and it's in your file. If you're ever questioned on it, oh, guess it was already done. There you go. This is what happened. Is it supposed to happen that way? No. You're supposed to be a buyer broker. You take your buyer broker agreement, you take your agency, your buyer advisory, your ABA, right? That ABA also has to be in there. You go show homes. Then you run across one that happens to be a Realty One Group property, right? Because we only have like 191 homes active right now. We actually have a lot of homes active right now in the area. So, or in Maricopa. So you very well could end up at a Realty One Group listing, right? Then you write your offer, right? Does that make sense? They usually aren't on the same day. And this is what's getting flagged. And the reason it's getting flagged is I've been talking to this buyer for 2 weeks. We've gone out and looked at properties, but oh, now they're finally serious. Okay, now I'm gonna have you sign the buyer broker agreement. Can't show a property. And guess what? If they are shopping you, you just got a huge fine.
Did it like 5 times.
Mhm.
So we're already-
Hey, Melissa,
Yes.
if I have the buyer broker exclusive with my, like, I'm doing it with my aunt and uncle.
Yeah.
And I have the contract for a certain date, but he's the biggest procrastinator in the world. And they have a lot of stuff going on right now. Is that gonna be a problem when the time comes that he does finally sign it, that it's like a month after I created it? Should I just recreate it before he's gonna sign it? I'm not showing them anything, though.
Well, I'm glad you're not showing them anything, but that is
Yeah.
what's gonna be red flagged, is that they think that you've shown them stuff that whole time.
Yeah, no, they
yeah.
understand I can't.
Yeah. Yeah, you need to redo it. If you really have not gone out and shown them anything, I would redo it and explain to them. I would pick up the phone and say, look, I understand you're not sure when you're starting this process, but this document needs to be signed. I sent it to you. That would be in our documents, that whole phrase that, it's a timely process. You do have to be timely in terms of doing that. So I would call him and say, please just get on and sign it right now. I'm going to stay on the phone with you. Go to your computer and sign it. Yeah,
Okay.
because that will be red flagged. Okay.
Okay.
So, let's see if I can move out of the way here. So, this is an HOA addendum. This is also something that is being flagged. What is wrong with this doc, these 4 lines? Line 75 is not filled out. How many of you skipped line 75?
How many do we see daily?
How many do we see that is blank? Right? And if you are representing the buyer, what would my recommendation be for what box you should check there?
Seller.
Seller. Cause other title. Yeah, you're paying for it. So I mean, this is on the HOA addendum. It's saying that the information that the seller completed on page 1, if additional fees not disclosed on, if there are any additional fees not disclosed on page 1 and payable at close of escrow shall be paid by who? So if I'm representing the buyer, I'm like, if the seller doesn't know how to fill out their own paperwork, that's on them. I'm sorry. If they didn't make their calls, because how many times does the agent fill that out for them? That's a really bad idea, by the way, because if this line says seller and you filled it out, not the seller, guess who they're going to come after for saying that you filled it out wrong? You should not be filling out page 1, right? And there's a Breeze form for that, so you can get away and not do it. You can send it to them and they have to complete it online.
If
Put
you
it in
do
them.
longer listings now, you can cover your ass towards the end of the year.
Yeah,
and
towards the end
remind
of the
your
year.
Seller to update this.
You need to update the HOA towards the end of the year with the changes that are happening. That is very true, because often they change in January. So please, folks, make sure 75 is checked, because what does title do if they get this and there's a something?
Make a call and say, who's paying that?
Or they
That-
put it on their credit or debit side, depending on what is checked.
Title can't put it anywhere.
If it's not.
If it's not checked, I put it on both sides and let the agents decide who's gonna pay for it.
And it's probably the agents that pay for it.
Title likes to collect all the extra notes that they can. just in case.
Just in
So
case.
please make sure that's filled out. Yeah, title can't say that it's one side or the other. The parties have to determine who's paying that. All right.
Bring it back to the seller.
Okay, so I do have a little bit of time here, folks. If you have not seen this document, a lot of this does seem very similar. The top of this is the same, right? It's tenant and broker rather than buyer broker. But let me get down to this bottom section here. Agencies fine, retainer fees all sign. Again, the reminder that broker compensation is not set by law. Here is the area that is so important that you understand. If you are working with rentals, use this form, because you guys are like, well, how do I know if I'm going to get any money? Well, guess what? Lines 32 to 34 say, or the compensation broker receives from landlord or landlord's broker, whichever is greater, because this was not a part of the settlement. You still have a variable on rentals. If you are using the buyer broker agreement and the landlord offers more money, guess what? You don't get it. Use the right form, okay? Because of the or. So please, please use this form when you are going out with tenants, not the other agreements, because you can get that coverage in case on the odd thought that they're actually paying, a percentage. Oh, that'd be funny. But if they're paying a percentage on that rental listing, and by the way, if people don't understand how a percentage works, it's the monthly rent times the term of the lease. So a year, 2 years, always fun doing 2 years and people calculate their commissions wrong. We're like, think you need to calculate that over 2 years. If it was agreed to that it's, a gross, that's what it says. It's the gross, right? It's the entire term of the initial lease, line 29, right? So, times that 12, 24 months or 13 months, because they're doing a baker's dozen or whatever, it's fine, whatever it is. And so, that actually sometimes equals more than $150, which is often what's being offered these days. But this form makes a difference. Please use this form. You still have that or option, okay? The rest of this is pretty similar.
Is there a form that has the tenant, the landlord, for like the SCA?
You would use the SCA.
Oh.
So, on your lease, you would add the SCA form. And you could do
Because
the,
it's used for all three, right?
it's used for all three. You can use the cab as well. You can ask the broker to broker, hey, can we get compensated? You can use a cab form. It works with all three buyer broker employment agreements, the tenant, the agreement to show property, or the exclusive employment agreement. Yeah, it's used for all three of those. Okay, let's see.
May I ask a question?
Yes, you can, and I ran out of slides.
I had a buyer broker exclusive employment agreement signed by this prospect buyer
Okay,
in February, which the form is dated October of 22. Should I get a new one signed?
So yes, folks, if you did not hear that on my trainings, any buyer broker agreements prior to August 1st did need to be redone.
Okay,
Buyer
Thank you.
broker agreements had to be redone. The listing contracts did not. I know, I've got people with listing contracts that want to modify those. There is some language you can use that is on our newsletter. We're sending that at every week. That's still on there. My 3 videos are there and then some printouts are below. Some of that will help if you're extending a listing contract, but buyer broker agreements must be redone because of the settlement. You cannot have the variable in there. They are not valid at this point.
Unless you're under contract.
Yes. If you're under
Or
contract, that you were under contract
Yeah.
prior to August 1st, you are fine. You do not need to redo those, okay? But anything post August 1st, if you went under contract on August 10th, that buyer broker isn't valid and you have to have a buyer broker. So, you may have to redo your buyer broker. Call me if you're in that scenario. Okay? Other questions? Open it up, you
So-
guys. Yeah.
I noticed 2 forms, buyer broker to show property agreement, and then there is another agreement. Should we use both of them?
No, ma'am.
Okay,
You need to attend and watch that 2-hour class
okay,
because there's a lot of variables there that I cannot go into here. There's the buyer
Sure.
broker exclusive employment agreement and the buyer
Okay.
broker agreement to show property. In brief, the buyer broker exclusive employment agreement, the buyer is marrying you. They're committing themselves to you and you to them for showing homes. The buyer broker agreement to show property, they can go with Tom tomorrow, they can go with Melissa Gasper the next day, they can go with, Bobby Lieb the next day. Whoever writes the contract gets the commission. There is no more procuring cause. So it is a huge difference and you do need to sit through that entire class. If you
Okay.
are active in real estate and you have not watched either my 6 hours or Leah's 6 hours or attended another series of these classes, you must commit to doing that. There's too much detail in here that you are not going to understand some of the nuances of these things. It's really, really important.
And it's.
all right, thank you.
So.
Yeah, it's
Great.
August 27th.
They get on that.
And they went into effect on August 1st.
Mhm.
There are people that did not understand they went into effect here in Maricopa County on August 1st. I had an agent call us that is out of state but works here. And she was just expecting the 17th. Everything was happening the 17th where she is like, sorry, Arizona changes their forms. When AAR changes their forms, they are effective when they put them out for use. And that was August 1st, period. Questions, please. We got 5 minutes.
So tiny.
I love it. Hopefully I gave you information. Hey, Roberta, any news from the title front in terms of changes?
No.
No,
We're
everything.
We're still instruction takers.
They're still instruction takers. Are you working on a new, we don't have new, I think our CDI may be getting modified. We don't have a new CDI yet. You're
I
working on
haven't
a
seen
new.
any adjusted
Okay.
yet.
And just so you guys know, we are working on a new checklist. Lots and lots of things on that checklist. So it's being worked on, just not quite done yet, but it will help you in terms of what documents you need where. There are lots of variables, unfortunately. So a lot of it is not required if applicable, which means you guys need to know if it's applicable, unfortunately. I see one of our agents has sample forms. Again, if you're sending something to your client for review without materials on them, you do need to use samples. Rock Title has a couple, do you have books upstairs?
Buyer and seller.
They have buyer and seller books upstairs with sample across them. So that's very useful. You also can call Melinda and get a customized version that you can print yourself or email that again has sample written all across it. So you can email it with a customized cover sheet you can send with it. Talk to Melinda at Rock Title. So
How many new forms are there?
there are 18 total forms that changed. I think there were about 4 or 5 new, I think there were 5 new forms.
I thought so.
7 new forms? Okay. I know there were 18 total. Somebody said, oh, no, there were 19 and we recounted. No, there were 18.
I just-
18 changed. Yeah.
Question just outside of the training, with all your experience, where do you see the landscape changing in the next few months as we go through?
Oh my gosh. Okay. So the question,
Such a good question.
It's a great question. Okay, so the question was, what, with my experience, where do I see the market changing over the next few months? How many of you, and you guys online can put your little hands up, have seen the interest rate drops in the last month?
Not a lot, just a little.
Down and back up.
Kinda went back up.
It's all the way down to 6.25 or 6. So I'd say that's a huge drop. That's a percent.
Yeah, that is.
It's gone down. Now, how many of you have seen the note from Elizabeth Warren saying that the loan rate between banks should be immediately reduced by 75 basis points? We don't have our lender here today. Mike, if you're on, or you can comment. I don't know that he had my link this morning, but so I don't know whether that's going to happen. For newer agents here, please know that when the rate between banks changes, it does not change the mortgage rate. We do not adjust from that. We adjust from the bond market. That being said, when everybody realizes that the Fed is lowering the interest rate, the bond market tends to have a little shifting, and we will see an adjustment. So I do think some other things are going to shift. I have felt, and I've certainly seen in the documents in the last week, more activity, more transactions going in escrow. I've seen a couple more fall out, or I've seen some fall out, but we are definitely seeing more activity. Are you seeing more openings in title right now? Little more? Little more. So, and it's very early yet with these shifts. I'm hearing more agents are going out and showing homes. And the only reason I'm hearing that is because I'm getting calls on the buyer broker agreement. Which agreement do I need to have? Because I'm going to show homes. These are obviously agents that haven't been doing stuff over the last few months. So they're trying to catch up. To your point that there are people trying to catch up that haven't been doing stuff. And normally on an election year, we, especially a presidential election year, we see the market stall between about October 15th to November 15th in the higher price point. I will add that caveat because people in the luxury market tend to be more, in my opinion, pessimistic on what's happening, and they just want to hold their money. They want to hold their cash and not make a move. In the my main market was not the luxury. My main market was more your blue collar, your working class. So in that market, to me, people buy and sell because something else is happening that they kind of have to do what they need to do and buy or sell because something's, they're being relocated for a job, that they're, some family member needs them to move in or move out or something like that. They need to merge a family. So typically I don't see that group stopping for an election. So I think if you are in the $150,000 to say $600,000 range, if that's your client base, my guess is I'm not sure that the election will make that much of a difference. If you are doing luxury homes, I think there you could see that little stall. Is that you've done this a long time, Roberta? Have you seen kind of on a presidential election that type of weird?
Seems, yeah, I would validate what you're saying.
So, I mean, again, doesn't have to happen. Normally at this time of year, we are already slowing down, right? Forget the election year. Normally by the end of August, September, we're starting to slow down until we hit that December to go back up. So I don't know that we're going to have a slowdown. In fact, I think we will have higher numbers in August, and I think both August and September on closings than we have had in a long time because of the interest rate drop. People have been waiting. Forget the fact, I'm sure title's going to be busy. Forget the refis. The refis are going nuts right now. right? People that were at 8.5 are refining and they're like, let's get this done. We can do it again later, but let's get this down. I mean, 2 points is huge, folks. That is a huge difference in your monthly payments.
Another reason I call people who closed last September, October, November, December, and the rates were just to call your client.
Yep, call your clients, Melissa Gasper's point, call your clients, say hello, say, you know, maybe you should check to see if it's time for you to refi. It's a great opportunity to reduce your monthly payments. You just never know if that would help. Did I answer part of your question? Did I give you?
Yeah, I was thinking a little bit more on the agent, broker.
I
Trans-
honestly, folks,
Max.
I don't, so the question is, these forms, like, am I gonna see a lot of shift with these forms? Honestly, I have been blessed because all of us, and I haven't done a lot of real estate activity myself in the last year. And I've had to take a listing and take a buyer out. I had no problem with it, folks. I found it invigorating to have the conversation. I felt it was useful to speak to my buyer in real dollars and cents. And look, this is how the paperwork is shifted. The reality is I'm still working on your behalf. One of the things I think I didn't finish the sentence earlier, but when I'm talking to a buyer, or what I encourage you to talk to your buyer about is, look, it's my job to try to negotiate for you all or some of this compensation, right? And then you're talking about other things. Do they need a home warranty? Do they need closing costs? Are they trying to buy the interest rate down? Or are they trying to get something to cover something else? So there's some other part of that package. And the reason I tie that in is because then you say, look, when we make an offer, we're going to ask for this compensation, as well as the home warranty, as well as closing costs. And at the end of the day, if they counter you, we're going to sit down and talk about what that looks like for you. And it may be that you're able to counter them, and or maybe you're able to accept that. But ultimately, if you can't, maybe it's not the right house for you. And maybe we start going to looking another one. Did I say anything about compensation on that second part of that paragraph? I didn't talk about compensation. I didn't back down and go, yeah, you know, if we don't get it all, I'll take the hit. I'll provide you with a 0.5 point. I didn't say that. And you don't need to. You don't need to. Your job is to negotiate. Don't do a commissionectomy before you get started, right? You have value. You share your value. You go to work for that buyer. Go after that compensation. Go see what the seller will provide. Are we finding any sellers saying no? Yes. A lot? No. Typically, they're very specific situations. I had an agent call me kind of panicked that the seller doesn't have any money. They're taking it in the shorts. They're not taking much on their compensation. They're like, we can't offer a buyer broker compensation. I said, fine. Tell them that. When they call you, say, look, there's nothing here. It's not that they don't want to, they can't. All right. Be transparent about that. You're the listing agent. You're working on behalf of the seller. You're not lying, right? There is nothing there. We need to get a deal through. Are there buyers out there that will take care of their buyer brokers? Yes, there are. Because you know what? You and I both know that home's probably being sold for less than, you know, what it could potentially be for in the future. It probably needs work, right?
If I can speak to that a little bit, I feel like everyone thinks there's a ton of change going on. The industry has not changed. How you do business has not changed. I think once people start doing the work of the new forms, we're gonna realize, oh, it all works exactly the same still. The only thing I've been telling my clients is, we used to set the rate that you're gonna offer, then we would publicly in the MLS advertise it. Now we're just going to account for it, you know, Mr. Seller, of what your net might be. And then when you get an offer, we get to look at the whole picture now.
Yep.
Because you're not already committed to 2.5% or whatever. You're not already, so like you're selling your house for 700,000. and we put on the market and on the MLS, it said 2.5%. We're waiting, we get an offer for 650, you're still paying that 2.5%. Whereas now it's communicated differently.
Right.
The whole offer comes in and then we say, oh, they're only offering 650, but they still want this, like, what can we counter back? So it just gives us one more thing. So I think it's just we're gonna find it's actually way less change than people are acting like. It's really simple. And as you saw Melissa's, things today, someone filled the HOA form out wrong. That's not changed and that one's not different. People are filling out the contract wrong for years, like still, it's just another form that we need to do like little cleanup items on and learn. I think we're gonna find that there's less changes than we thought there were.
I've seen a lot of things, and it's more like with, like, consumers, knowing that whatever's left over, so if they want more to reduce their price of what they're gonna pay for the house, take it out on the agent, they feel a little more empowered, so it's nothing to do with the process changing, listing agents or sellers are still offering, let's say, 2.5 co-broke.
Who's taking it out? A buyer
They
or
want
list?
The buyer wants the buyer agent to take 2%, so the other 0.5% goes to the buyer.
Well, and that's up to you to negotiate.
Right. but
And-
that's the
and
change I'm
say-
saying. That's all I'm
And
saying.
I have not seen that at all. I am
Okay.
seeing way more than that on most of mine,
Okay,
so.
good, that's what I'm, so,
So, but I mean, yeah, I am not seeing people reduce at this point, a lot of that. Most of what we're seeing is higher than that. Now, again, I think there are scenarios where a buyer broker may, elect to do 2% and you're competing against other people, right? So is that a scenario that's plausible? Sure. And as the market heats up and properties sell faster, are we going to see an adjustment there? Probably. Right? I mean, that it's always a negotiable thing. And if you're having to, you're going out and buying something like that, listing agents, if homes are selling in 5 minutes, are they going to go, hold on a minute? Yeah, they are. It's all negotiable, but it has to start with you being confident in your services and what you're offering and making sure that you justify, look, this is what I get paid. And if you need to, maybe you need to explain all the costs that come into doing this business. Because folks, people do not understand. You pay your health care, you pay for your car, you pay for your taxes, you pay for your lock boxes, you pay for your associations, and that's before you've started, right? That's before you do anything else. How many of them would walk out the door and say, okay, today's a new day. I'm going to drop, I don't know, 15, 20, 25,000 before I even begin on all of these things. What's your healthcare costs for your family? What are your car costs? What's your phone costs? What are all those things that are part of this business that people go, well, yeah, you just take care of that. No, we don't. We have to pay for that. Like, yeah, we take care of it. Sure. By paying for it. It's a lot of money. I have a family of 4 people. Our insurance is not free. Health insurance on a family of 4 is not cheap. So, you have to look at what that is. And sometimes you do have to explain that. There are some clients that are just not going to get it.
And there's some clients that are not gonna care. that
And-
you pay your own.
And you know what?
Yeah,
And
good
there's,
for you, I paid for my medical. Yeah.
no,
but-
they don't pay for their medical. If they have a job, their company pays for their medical, not, well, you-
It's still something that comes out of your,
yeah. You
Yeah, you still have to pay.
you still have to pay.
depending on the.
But-
company.
But
It's
dependent,
less.
yeah, but less. But, and I do agree with that. But so I think that you do have to look at that. And I agree with you. There are some people that aren't going to care. And you know what? At the end of the day, you have to decide if you want to work with them.
There's always gonna be the 1%.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think there may be the one you try. Say, okay, you know what? Fine. I'll work with you for the whatever it is, 2%. Let's see how this goes. And you know what? Do it once. See if it was worth it. If it was worth it, great. If it wasn't, you have that answer from there forward. Look, I'll tell you, and Roberta can, well, I don't know but look, during 2008 to 2015, there were times I was like, I just want to make $3,000 on this deal. However, I can piece together $3,000. I mean, it originally started at 5, by the way, and by 2015, I just wanted $3,000, right? I mean, please understand, prices were a lot lower, right? But still, it was like, I just want to make something on this deal. I did short sales that took 6 to 12 months, right? So yeah, I was making 4 cents an hour on those, but the point is that did we negotiate what we were making? Yes, we did. And it's all still negotiable, as Melissa said. I think you as agents just need to step back and not panic. You need to find your comfort zone. And again, I've enjoyed talking to buyers. I had a great conversation and my clients needed down payment assistance. Guess what? We just got them 3% in down payment assistance. So it is possible. And compensation. So, it is all possible, right? And we're about to negotiate for a whole lot more because there's a whole lot wrong with that house. So, but it is all a matter of negotiation, and you just have to figure out how to set yourself up first. Something that I used to hear was, I think Mandy talked about this, right? If you can't negotiate for yourself,
Yeah.
how do you think the seller is going to feel about you, or your buyer for that matter, about you negotiating for them? If you can't stand your ground for yourself, how are you standing the ground for them? Now, I do know there are some people out there that say, it's much easier for me to stand up for them than for me. Like, I get that, but you have to prove your point.
Those are people who don't make their bed in the morning. You have to say for yourself, and then you go on to work for yourself.
There you go. She's saying, start by making your bed in the morning. If you did not,
So good.
make the
I
bed,
have-
start your day.
I have a
Yes.
Former mentor that had a really funny line, and it was, make sure I'm making sure I get it right. Shy realtors have skinny kids.
Okay, so with that note, unless somebody online has something, shy realtors have skinny kids. We'll take that away with us. Anybody online have anything else? Otherwise, now we've gone 15 minutes over, but I think it was worth it to get. Yep.
So I love the way that you start your buyer presentation with, look, it's my job to negotiate on your behalf, and you kind of start going through concessions, home warranty, things that you can negotiate on their, what?
The others you will do.
Yeah.
Right.
And just kind of leave compensation out. I don't have to explain the process at all. I don't really need to explain how it used to work and how the buyer.
No, you don't have to talk about how it used to work. You do need to talk about how it works, that they are going to be responsible for paying you. You absolutely have to do that. But my point is, after you get done with that, then you start talking about all the other things that are negotiables, and you move away from talking specifically about compensation. What I feel is happening is that agents are trying to have the whole conversation be about compensation. It isn't, right? Think about all the things you negotiate in a purchase contract, right? Whether that is the closing date, right? How many of you try to negotiate for the first 4 days in a month so your client doesn't have to make a mortgage payment for 50 days, right? So I've got somebody we're negotiating October 1st. Their first payment isn't until December 1st, right? That's huge, right? There are all sorts of things you put into negotiating.
Right.
Closing date, concessions, home warranty, HOA fees, all the different HOA fees, right? Cap improvements. So there are a lot of different things in there. So Priscilla, you're right here. I'll talk about that in a second. But my point is that you definitely have the opportunity to talk about what you do as your value. What are you providing to your clients, right? Move away from just your compensation. And that way you can have the second comment about if we don't get everything you need. Because ultimately that's the worry, right? The worry is they're going to be responsible for all this.
Yeah.
They're going to be responsible for their closing costs. They're going to be responsible for paying you. They're going to be responsible for HOA. Look, that poor person that goes to Sun City doesn't know they have a friggin' $5,000 cap improvement fee. And they're like, what do you mean? Well, it's there. You should have known that if you're looking at Sun City, but that's your job as the agent to make sure they know that, right? So the point is that then you can have the conversation. I think it's so critical that they know before you go looking at homes, if you don't have the money based on those negotiations to close that transaction, the buyer needs to know now they may have to walk away from it.
Right.
You don't want to have that conversation when they're sitting there going, I love the house, I love this pool, I love this, I love this, I love this.
Are we allowed to say, because if the buyer's like, I can't pay that, are we allowed to say the seller might provide a substantial portion?
Well, I think that's part of saying you're gonna go to negotiate it because the sellers often do pay it. We don't know what and I would caveat, I don't know. Some sellers, to your point, some sellers are not agreeing to pay compensation. We won't know until we make that offer, but that's part of what we're going to do together.
Well, like, let's use this buyer closing
Jen, I'll
estimate
get to you.
from Rock Title's app and see how much you're gonna need from each seller, you know? Let's estimate, there's title fees, there's escrow fees, there's lender fees, there's prepaids, and there's your real estate. Just because we're the one writing the contract doesn't mean we're the one that's gonna take it up the, you know? So we're a profession, a business, you know, like.
Can
we're
you guys
corporations
online hear
too,
her?
so.
Somebody give me a thumbs up. If you can hear her. Yeah, okay. All right, so,
Yeah, I mean,
so
you can-
Priscilla asked, she says she think that's because buyers are hearing that sellers, you know, that they're responsible with their buyers now, that sellers aren't paying the costs. And here's the thing about that. Yes, they're hearing that, and yes, you need to talk about it, but you don't need to end the conversation with your compensation. You need to end the compensation with, we have to look at all the things that go into buying the home and whether or not you have the money to close on that home. You know that includes your compensation. They know it includes the HOA closing costs and those other things. So you need to have that conversation, because if you can't get what they need, you may have to go to another property. You may have to go to 5 more properties, right? If the seller's not being cooperative. I don't know. Jenna, you had your hand up. What did you want to say? Did I cover it?
So we had the best training in regarding all the changes that happen. It's just an advice that I have for everyone since we jumped into working and applying all these forms. I was super worried before I sat down with my client. The bond is the same bond, you put the same offer, you relax. When you get that client, then everything will be piece of cake to you because you know your value. That's number one. You know how your service and the quality. So nothing is going to happen or change. And as you said, Melissa,
Yeah.
there's a lot of sellers they will not offer, but these are the ones that set in the market for months. They don't want to pay anything. So one other thing is the bind with the lender. These are the ones who will suggest if there's no compensation, concession offered, only the commission. This is when they will suggest like, hey, slightly above the price, the purchase price, and you should be fine. Like the bond with all the parties that they are working together is number one to get you peace in mind. Thank
Right.
you.
And of course, it makes a difference depending on the price point, right? You're talking $1 million home, adding 1%, you know, either case, adding 1% or 2% to the purchase price may be possible. Little different when you are talking about $1 million, right? That's a little higher number. Can the property appraise for that? As for those homes that are not offering compensation, look, some of you, if you guys have buyer brokers that are willing to pay the buyer broker fee, you know, that's something to go looking for. Maybe you have the ability to go in where somebody else can't, and maybe you can negotiate a deal that gives your client the edge. Because if your buyer is paying your own fee, they've got cash to cover that, then you don't have to worry about that. And you can make an offer where there is no SCA on there, no cab on there. You're giving the seller a discount in essence. Maybe they'll take that because you're up against a different offer that is asking for all of that. So that could be to your advantage. Little twist there. We haven't talked about that, right? So there are lots of ways to look at this, but most importantly, know your value, practice before you go meet with your clients. Please try out the conversation. So to your point, you don't feel like you're tripping over your own words if you're not used to saying these things. Practice it so you feel comfortable. You don't have to say, well, you know, a month ago you could have done this. That's not the way to start the conversation. Explain the buyer broker document. You've got the document there. Talk about it. Talk about how you're going to work on behalf of your client and make sure they get the best of their scenario. And that you're going to take care of them. And they'll feel that from you. If you are confident in yourself, they're going to understand that. All right. You guys, I'm going to wrap this up because I've got an appointment. You guys have a great Tuesday and we will see you next week. Have a good one.
Bye.
Thanks a lot.
You are welcome.